נראה לי שנתחיל. אז אני שמחה להציג היום מישהו שאני מאוד מעריכה ואוהבת וגם זוכה לעבוד איתו, אונקולוג בכיר ומנהל את המערך של טיפול תומך בשערי צדק, פרופסור צ'רני. זהו, הבמה שלך.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation. And what I wanted to share with you today is work not only of my own, but this is a project that I've been doing along with people like Harvey Chochinov, that many of you will know from Dignity Therapy, Ben Korn, who was at Hebrew University, who is the head of the Hope Center at the Hebrew University, Linda Emanuel, is a fascinating woman. She's a geriatrician, palliative care physician, psychotherapist, and spiritual care provider. And Nessa Coyle, the former head palliative care nurse at Sloan Kettering, and Carrie Lethborg, who is a meaning-centered therapy specialist in Australia. This is the agenda. I'm going to talk about why this issue is important. I'm going to talk about despair, hope, the difference between hope and optimism, approaches to facilitating adaptive hope, how we deal with patients who hope for miracles, and approaches to patients who struggle to find hope at all. So let me start with some background. I presented to the group, I think last year, my work about overtreatment. And one of the things that comes up in overtreatment is one of the big reasons that patients get overtreated is around this issue of hope, that oncologists who fear that by not giving more treatment, you're going to shatter the hope of patients and their loved ones, that both for patients and for physicians, that hope is a powerful motivator to continue anti-cancer treatments even when the likelihood of benefit is very small. That some oncologists perceive that their professional role is to sustain hope. And amongst the professional norms with oncology, a lot of oncologists see their role is to preserve hope. And they are very worried that honest communication will take away patients' hope. A second trigger is this. The journal The Lancet periodically does these Lancet commissions looking into big subjects. And one of the big subjects they looked into was what they called the human crisis in cancer care, that cancer care was too technical with not enough human care. And they said that the cancer systems need to center psychological care in a coordinated manner. This vision is not aspirational, but a necessary correction to a system that too often fails too often treats the body while neglecting the person and their fears, hopes, grief, and relational needs. But how to deal with hope is something which leaves many people very confused. Now, this work is not only relevant to cancer patients, it is really relevant to anyone, particularly dealing with serious illness, particularly those with vital organ failure and degenerative neurological diseases. In our hospital, we're seeing about 5,000 patients a year in this sort of situation. So the balance between hope and despair is often influenced by a complex interplay of a range of factors that can either nurture hope or contribute to feelings of despair. And what we need to do is in order to be able to facilitate hope, we need a deeper understanding of both of these concepts. So I want to first take a deep dive into what is despair or yeush. Despair is a profound sense of hopelessness and helplessness and loss of meaning. It happens when people feel that their circumstances are beyond control and that there is no positive outcome possible. There's nothing to hope for. Clinically, what does it look like? It has an emotional dimension with feeling sad or anxious and fearful of the future, a lack of meaning and purpose, patients who are despairing often have social withdrawal and withdrawal from loved ones and from other people, often due to feelings of being a burden or being misunderstood. Often there's a spiritual crisis with doubts about faith, existential fears, and questions fearing the fairness of what's happening to them. So there are lots of factors that can contribute to despair. Physically, patients who've got uncontrolled symptoms, progressive physical decline, and feeling medicalized when everyone's focusing on the disease and forgetting about them as a person. Psychologically, patients with high levels of anxiety or depression, these thoughts can overshadow their hopeful thoughts. People with catastrophic thinking and catastrophizing about their situation, fear of the unknown, and interestingly, patients with whose expectations are so high, and yet the gulf between, or the gap between what they hope for and what's going on in reality is enormous. They can start to feel quite overwhelmed. Thankfully, in Israel, most of our patients have got good social supports, but particularly amongst elderly olim, we see a lot of people who have profound social isolation, where a lack of meaningful connections can leave people feeling alone and unsupported. Patients and families that have strained relationships and unresolved issues this can become a source of distress. And the situation, where paradoxically it looks like the family is around and supportive, but what they're saying, al tidag, akol yeh beseder, sending a message that they're not really connecting with where the patient is. Particularly when you've got a patient who knows or feels how advanced or how uncontrollable their situation is. And this is the patients who are surrounded by people, and yet no one is relating to where they are really. In some cultures, illnesses, particularly cancer, is stigmatized, where there's a lot of pressure to be stoic. Tiyeh gibor, tiyeh lochem gadol, and this sort of thing can prevent patients from seeking support and sharing their fears, again, highlighting this issue of isolation. And also when there's conflicts between the cultural beliefs of the patient and and medical culture. When one talks about the existential contributors to despair, things like fear of the unknown, what's going to happen to me after death, the feelings of loss of identity, that I'm no longer an independent person, I'm dependent upon others, I can't do what I usually do, I can't carry on my normal role, either as a parent or a husband or in a profession. These can all things that can enhance a sense of purposelessness. And some people have unresolved guilts or regrets from their lives that can also contribute to despair. I think that's an important message to say, or to emphasize, is that despair is common, but it is not inevitable. And many patients feel moments of despair, but most of the time they're not in a despairing state. So while despair may arise, it's often possible to alleviate it and address it with appropriate supports. And patients commonly oscillate between times of hope and times of despair. And with the right supports, despair can be temporary rather than a permanent situation. But we will come back to the patients for whom that is a persistent problem. So hope is the antithesis or the opposite of despair. Of these different definitions, my favorite one is that hope is the emotional bridge between an unsatisfying present and a possible future. In the context of life-limiting illness, hope takes on a deeply personal and multifaceted role. It's important to emphasize that hope is not only about wishing for a cure or wishing for reversal of the disease, and that our hopes change as the disease moves on. From an academic point of view, I'm going to show the two most common models of hope. This one, Snyder's hope theory, is the most commonly studied one, and there are three elements. Firstly, you need to have something you're aiming for, something that is not in your present, but you're hoping for in the future. And this can be, these are all personally meaningful, things like cure, prolonged stability, quality time with their family, attending a wedding or another milestone event, reconciliations, being comfortable, being independent, having spiritual peace, living life to the last drop. These are all meaningful goals. There needs to be a pathway to get there. And there needs to be motivational energy to want to get it. So just to emphasize the difference between a hope and a wish, I was born a biological man, and I could wish to be a biological woman, but I cannot hope for that because there is no pathway for me to change my biological sex. So you can wish for something which is not plausible at all, and there's no pathway, but you can't meaningfully hope for it. So for something to be a hope, there needs to be a meaningful pathway. Another definition, again, is starts with a generalized hope, which is a broad sense of openness, inner resilience, and trust in the future, with a specific desired future outcome, such as cure or symptom relief or meaningful life events. And in this model, they describe 6 different dimensions: a feeling dimension, a cognitive dimension that you can reason this is achievable, a behavioral dimension that is followed by actions towards the goal, that to achieve the goal you may be connected with other people, that the goal is integrated with issues from the past, endurance in the present, and anticipation and hope in the future. And the specific hopes are contextual. They're shaped by the individual's environment and, importantly, their life situation. So this context of life situation shows how that hopes can change in response to the changing realities in a life situation. So with a patient with a cancer diagnosis, they may initially hope for a cure or recovery or for a breakthrough treatment. As the disease progresses, their focus of hopes generally will shift gradually to other things such as meaningful milestones or other meaningful projects. And at the end of life again, the hopes can adapt again to different things like finding peace, resolving unfinished business, not suffering, and having peace of mind. So this is this characteristic of hope being adaptable. It doesn't mean to be for a cure. It can evolve over time to all of these other things. And it's this characteristic of the adaptability of hope that becomes critically important. So when cure becomes unattainable, hope will often recalibrate repeatedly over time with a changing focus on different hopes. And that the notion of hope can persist even as the object of the hope changes over time. Hope is often confused with optimism. Optimism is the belief that things are going to be okay, or that things will turn out well, and hope. You can have hope even when you're uncertain that things will turn out okay. So I'm a supporter of the Melbourne Football Club, which had not won a premiership since 1964, and every year I hope that they're going to win a premiership, and I hope that they sometimes and I wish that they'll win a premiership, but as the season progresses and they're losing all the games, my hopes change, and my hope is that they'll play well, or that some of their star players will play well, and so my hopes can change through the season. Even when my wish for them to win the premiership becomes impossible. Why hope's important? Because it has lots of benefits to us. Hope improves our emotional well-being and our physical outcomes. It encourages people who are hopeful are more likely to be cooperative with treatments and with rehabilitation and with health supportive routines. If we're hopeful, that impacts our family members and to be more connected with us, to have less anticipatory grief, and to inspire meaningful connections with them. Hope supports emotional resilience. It makes us better able to cope with difficulties and challenges. And hope supports appreciation of all of these other different goals that we may have. And just as we saw for despair, there are many factors that can affect hopefulness. Patients who have got less symptoms or adequate relief, or if they've got a perception of physical strength and feeling physical capable, even in small ways or small improvements, these things can improve hope. Supportive relationships, open communication, and having people to advocate for you all support hope. There are clearly some people, there are personality factors. Some people are adaptive copers by nature. And people with a history of coping well are more likely to be able to develop this adaptive hope and to change the focus of their hope. And people similarly with a positive personality who look for opportunities for joy, connection, and meaning despite their prognosis. And people with a sense of control, again, it is also enhances the likelihood of being able to focus on changing hopes. Hope also has existential and spiritual dimensions. Many people with terminal illnesses derive a lot of hope by reflecting on the meaning of their lives and their accomplishments and their relationships, and this in things like dignity-based therapies. People who have strong spiritual beliefs and faith in a higher power and in an afterlife and in a physical continuation beyond the physical, a spiritual continuation after death, that's often very sustaining. And issues of legacy and contribution, refocusing on people's achievements, such as having raised a family or creating something lasting, mentoring others, it can all give people feelings that their lives have had a strong sense of purpose. And then there are cultural factors that contribute to hope. The people that see dying as a catastrophe are very different to those who see dying as part of the circle of life. Or people that will say, you can see that every atom in my body has existed for probably for billions of years, and even after my demise will continue to exist and probably be part of other people's lives in the future. You'll have a very, very different approach to death than those who see it as a catastrophe. Communities like ours, where patients generally have strong collective support from their families, that is a very powerful factor that is very helpful for hopefulness. And people that have a spiritual practice like prayer or meditation, these sort of things also are very helpful for helping sustain a sense of hope. So, because hope is such a central factor in our lives, and in fact, when one looks at palliative care, one of the evolving terms in palliative care is that the aim is to help patients to develop gradually adaptive coping mechanisms that can allow them to deal with the emerging prognostic reality. And how one develops adaptive coping is very much about how to develop or refocus hope on achievable, meaningful goals, even as life circumstances change. And this is really a central part of our work and daily practice. So it involves and this is an overview now, the deliberate blending of honesty and compassion with realism and possibility of future meaningful issues. That when there are losses, that we acknowledge that there are losses and we can help patients mourn those losses. But at the same time as there are losses, to work with patients to highlight what remains achievable, meaningful, and life-affirming. And at each stage of life, there may be different things that remain possible. Because it's these alternative goals and engagement with those that helps to preserve this capacity for meaningful experiences. Now, this is just a brief overview, but hope supporting. There's a whole range of hope supporting therapies which we're going to discuss. So I think I'm going to start with the issue of the relationship, because everything about hope building is about the relationship. Our longitudinal relationship with patients, where they feel cared for, where we can listen to emotions, where we confront existential concerns. This is the situation that allows people to start to address these issues. And it needs to be this is part of the reason why I like to upstream palliative care, because the palliative care clinicians are skilled at this. They can start to be dealing with these issues and developing a relationship long before the patient is facing their end of life issues. So this empathic communication, this is a central thing, and it involves active listening, sometimes tolerating silence, and giving a safe and caring place where patients can talk about their fears, their anger, and their ambivalence, or whatever is going on in their heart, without someone saying, "Al tidag, kol yeh beseder," because "Al tidag, kol yeh beseder" is a way to close his doors on conversation. It means that message is, I don't want to hear this, and I don't want to talk about it. So our conscious aim needs to be that patients need to feel deeply cared for as people, that they're seen and understood, and to create a psychological safe place for them where they will be understood and where it will be heard, and they can talk about things safely and get support. and this has been called by Harvey Chochinov intensive person-centered care. This is a different form of intensive care. This is a care that addresses physical, emotional, relational, cultural, and spiritual dimensions of what's going on in patients' lives, that is focused on the individual person, and that is respectful of their values, their beliefs, and their social context. So all of these things, if we're doing all of these things, that's going to reinforce the capacity for patients to develop these or to activate their adaptive mechanisms. So, I mean, there are many instances along the course of illness where the news isn't good. And the principles when conveying bad news and preserving hope are that, number one, the communication needs to be compassionate and honest, and that when people can tolerate difficult truths when they're given with empathy, clarity, and attentiveness to the person. So when I have to break bad news, I'll say to the patients, firstly, I'll start the conversation. Look, we have a difficult conversation today. And after explaining what the situation is to say, I wish things were different, to align with their wishes and to show that you're understanding the emotions and responding to the emotions. But the conversation doesn't end there. It also says that it also goes on that, okay, we may have lost this, but there are still important and meaningful things in your life that are important that we can work on together. That I'm committed to working with you to try to work towards those. So it's almost like a no but conversation. So when cure and full recovery isn't attainable, we try to focus things on what are the other meaningful things for patients, and people often need to be reminded that these things are important to them, and it's having these alternative goals, and to see that these goals are really important helps to preserve engagement with life and the capacity for meaningful experiences. So we don't need to negate the hope for cure. We don't just say forget about it. But we can say, look, that's now going to be much more difficult, more difficult to achieve, and possibly even impossible to achieve. That we're going to be dealing much better with our energy if we can also see that these other things are important, or to leave that hope behind for the time being. So we're trying to essentially shift hope, the focus of hope, from the external outcome of cure to the hopes for relational, psychological, and existential or spiritual dimensions of life, the internal things. And so these are the different dimensions of hope. Hope for simply not to suffer, not to have physical symptom control, to have strength, to be able to have the mobility to participate in things. That's physical hopes. Cognitive hopes to be clear-headed, to be able to communicate. Relational hopes, to reconnect with people, to mend relationships, to have meaningful time with friends and family, and to feel loved. Hopes for emotionally, hopes for moments of connection and joy and calm, to remain emotionally present with loved ones. Existential hopes are for peace of mind, for reconciliation, for transcendence, I guess, is another way of just saying peace of mind. My father died 3 years ago, and my mum died 21 years ago from Alzheimer's disease. And until the last weeks of his life, my father would listen to recordings that my mother had made almost 50 years ago. And this was a treasure, a sustaining treasure for him. And I tell patients the things that they prepare, whether it's letters or recordings or anything, is going to have a value for their surviving family beyond anything that they can imagine. And leaving a legacy and leaving for patients, for surviving family members is another hope promoting sort of activity. And then there are family issues. I hope that my wife will cope. I hope that my children are going to be okay. I hope that my family members will support one another. And when family members ask, what are the important things to say when someone is dying? I say there are several important things to say. Number one, I love you. Number two, that we are supporting one another. Number three is we're going to be, I don't want you to worry, we're going to be okay. Because these are key family-focused future issues that are very much on patients' mind. So let's take a deeper dive into some of those things. We talked about the role of the healthcare providers. The other facilitators of hope can be family and caregivers. They can promote presence by being emotionally available and not giving glib responses about call yeah beseda, but listening and being available, and encouraging patients setting realistic, meaningful goals. And when things are achieved, like even sitting at the table with a family, or being awake through a whole afternoon to celebrate these small successes, not just big ones. For many patients, their spiritual or religious beliefs will provide a framework for hope. And this could be for many patients who have religious feelings, supporting those is very helpful and meaningful. With families, as I said, honest dialogue, being prepared to if the patient starts a difficult conversation, to engage with them, because if you avoid it, it makes patients feel worse. And the families can also get involved with things like making albums, dealing with legacy building, fixing up relationships, and many small acts of encouragement. Now, for families that are struggling themselves with anticipatory grief or caregiver burden or issues of uncertainty, how we support the caregivers can help to preserve a hopeful environment for the patient. So our work with the caregivers can also further indirectly help to create a more hopeful environment for the patient in their family environment. Spirituality and existential issues. These can either be religious or secular, and these can help support exploration of meaning, forgiveness, reconciliation, this is work that is often done by our spiritual care providers, but really all members of the team can be involved with this. So they can help transition the hopes from survival to recovery, or from survival to recovery, to how to adapt, how to find peace of mind, how to find trust, how to work in our relationships. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these structures, like life review techniques, dignity therapy, narrative therapy, meaning-making interventions. Sometimes group work is helpful. These all help patients to articulate and connect with what's mattered most in their lives, what they're most proud of, and how they wish to live their lives despite their limitations. And so by helping address these issues, we can help transform despair to a sense of more coherence, purpose, and sometimes even to help people to get to closure. Particularly in the Jerusalem area, and probably in all of Israel, the issue of patients hoping for miracles is very common. Hoping for miracles is about divinely provided exceptionalism, and for some, you can believe in something and hope for an exceptional outcome even without believing in God. And this is a psychologically understandable response to a life-limiting or chronic illness, and it can sustain a sense of possibility even when conventional prognostic optimism is limited. So this is a form of hope where the means to the end is through divine intervention. So by allowing patients to imagine outcomes that aren't constrained by present realities, this is a way of buffering anxiety, essentially. So religious exceptionalists hope as a hope for a miracle through God, and secular patients can be hoped to be patients who say to me, that may be true for everyone else, but I know that there's occasionally exceptional patients, and I want to be one of them. And this hope for exceptionalism is very common, particularly when patients start to deal with prognostic awareness. And some people have described the fact it's almost like a pendulum that hopes the patients swing between being very scared about the prognosis to swinging back to saying, well, maybe I'll be the exception, and until gradually they get to a greater sense that a greater sense of peace with their evolving understanding of their prognosis. So when I have patients that hope for miracles, I encourage, what I will say to them is that it's okay to hope or to pray for miracles, but we're not allowed to rely on them. And this encourages a dual framework where they can maintain their belief in an extraordinary possibility, while simultaneously, saying, dealing with the realities as they are. And this provides for a psychological sort of dual coping. And when this hope for miracles is shared with family members, this can often strengthen relationships, and here spiritual care providers can be very helpful in helping to reconcile extraordinary hope with adaptive decision making and also realistic expectations at the same time. Now, sometimes patients want to have the hope for the miracle, but they don't want to be dealing with the realities at all. And this is when hoping for miracles becomes rigid and inflexible and becomes problematic. Particularly if it blocks discussions about prognostication, about prognosis, if it impairs informed decision making because they don't want to hear what the real situation is, and it blocks it from assimilating the emerging realities. And here, this is a situation where the hope for miracles is not an adaptive form of resilience, but it's rather a defensive denial or in itself an expression of demoralization. And this sort of hope can erode trust, hinder adaptive coping, and delay practical planning. And this is one of the problem situations which we'll discuss as well now. So when we have patients who seem to be stuck, who can't recalibrate their hopes, how do we deal with it? And I'm going to describe four different situations. Firstly, there are the patients that have difficulty in reframing their hope. Not everyone has a great degree of emotional dexterity, and there are many reasons that can arise for that. And in this situation, when you need patience, that there's no need to relinquish the primary hope for cure, but in each encounter, also discuss with them other things that are important and meaningful for them, in the hope that gradually they will start to be able to start a process of more slowly reframing their hopes. So this is a situation that requires, support and persistence and exploring, what are the important goals for them. The second situation is the patient who has fixed, rigid hope only for cure and for nothing else. And this is a harmful situation, particularly if it starts to lead to demands for harmful treatments or inappropriate interventions. And here, there's an important distinction between respecting someone's hope and colluding with harmful and inappropriate decision making. And here the approach is, again, framed with empathy and compassion, but honest communication regarding the medical realities. And when I say professional responsibilities, I say, look, it's really important, but I don't want to harm you, and I don't want to see you harm yourself. So here, is attempts to avoiding harmful treatments, and sometimes setting limits in terms of appropriate resource limitations. The patient who says, I insist you must take me to intensive care, there are situations where you say to patients that that's just not going to be an option, because it's not fair for other patients who could, who realistically could get much more likely to get benefit from that very limited resource. And in all situations like this, continue to project empathy for the patient and also for the family members. I'll share a story that I had a couple of weeks ago. I had looked after a 54-year-old woman who was a single mother, and she was through IVF had two children who were 2 and 4, both of them with severe autism, and they were pre-verbal. Now, this woman had advanced metastatic colon cancer, which had progressed through all treatments. She was living with her older sister, who was also a single mother, also with another 2 kids. And she had no hope. She knew she was dying. She knew that there was not good reason to, she was terrified for the future of these kids, and justifiably. And this was a situation where, which was challenging for everyone involved, with a pervasive despair and demoralization. And in this sort of situation, the best we could do was to manage the symptoms, to try to support her emotionally and to be a presence for her, to give her as much care as possible and much human connection as possible, but knowing that we're not going to be able to make this situation good. And this ties in with the last one, that when patients don't achieve adaptive hope, this is not a failure. Not all patients are going to be able to reframe hope, and insistence that they do so can start to become counterproductive. For some people, it just psychologically and existentially they're overwhelmed, and we come back in that situation to what Harvey Chochinov called intensive humanistic caring, meticulous symptom control, meticulous support and nursing care, maintaining a presence, maintaining a connection, maintaining emotional, not abandonment, and giving them every support we can through to the end of life, knowing that it will never be good, but it'll be as least bad as possible. So, how to tie this up? But firstly, the first message is that hope is more than just optimism or wishful thinking. the notion of hope and the flexibility of hope is to allow patients to find light in the darkness, to try to help people reestablish with purpose, connection, and dignity, to recognize that hope is not an all or none phenomenon, that it can be a dynamic and adaptive resource that can empower patients to navigate life-limiting illness with resilience, meaning, and dignity. And we do this by continually trying to focus on what remains possible. And what remains, we can always find something that will remain possible, almost always. And that we as caregivers and the patients' families and other healthcare providers can all play an important role in help evolve in ways that brings comfort and fulfillment. So, what I've tried to do in this hour is try to give you an understanding of what is hope, and what sort of things that we can do as a team to try to facilitate it, through the course of the illness. And I hope that you will find this useful. The paper is currently in review, and it will hopefully appear in the next coming months in Annals of Oncology, and it will be an open source paper. So beyond this talk, I hope that you'll be able to use the written resource as well. So with that, if you can unconnect me from the share, and I'll be more than happy to take questions or to enter into discussion about this. So thank you very much.
תודה רבה. אני רוצה לשאול שאלה. שומעים אותי?
כן.
אני מרגיש הרבה פעמים שהרפריימינג של התקווה עושה אותי כמטפל קצת עצוב. זאת אומרת שיש איזה, תוך כדי התהליך הזה של הגדרה מחדש,
כן.
יש כאילו הרגשה הזו שזו מלחמה בנסיגה על התקווה. זאת אומרת שזה לא רפריימינג של התקווה, זה להסביר, לתווך לחולה את זה שהוא בנסיגה ביחס לתקוות המקוריות שלו. איך אתה מעודד את עצמך?
אני משתתף באבל על התקווה שכבר לא ריאלית. I really wish I could have cured you, and I really wish I had medicines but I need to be honest with you, and I don't have them. And pushing on for more medicines at this stage is more likely to hurt you than to help you, and I don't want to hurt you. אני לא רוצה לגרום לך אבל או נזק. ואם המטרות שלנו זה לעזור לך לחיות ולחיות הכי טוב שאפשרי, מעבר לעניין של הטיפול התרופתי, יש עדיין הרבה דברים מאוד חשובים בחיים שלך, ואני רוצה עם הזמן, עם החודשים, שבועות או שנים שנשאר לך, לעזור לך, שאתה תמשיך לחיות הכי טוב שאפשרי עם הכוחות שיש לך.
האם
אבל ה-wish statement להגיד שאני גם כן מקווה, so you're aligning yourself, okay? ואתה מכיר עם התקווה שהיו להם שזה כבר לא ריאלית, אבל והם יכולים גם כן להחזיק בזה. הם לא צריכים לוותר על זה, להעביר את הפוקוס, אבל לעודד אותם גם אם אתה עדיין רוצה לקוות לזה, זה מותר, אבל חשוב גם כן להכיר את החשיבות של הדברים האחרים גם כן.
האם ההשתתפות באבל שלו עוזרת לנו באבל שלנו עליו, או שעדיף לנו מראש להגיע עם איזושהי מידה של חציצה, של איזה מסך עדין בין, על מנת שלא ניכנס לאבל עליו?
לאבל על מה? אפשר להבל על כל פעם שמאבדים מטרה זה אבל קטן, ולהכיר בזה. I can say it is really difficult to, זה קשה להפנים שזה לא, ואני, כמו שמעתי, so the process, אבל זה חלק של התהליך of letting go.
תודה.
אנחנו כולנו שמענו את החולים שאומרים אם אני מגיע לזה או זה או זה מצב אני לא רוצה לחיות יותר, אבל שמגיעים לשם תשמע, אני אולי כן יכול להתמודד, וזה, they draw another line in the sand. אז this human adaptability, זה לא דבר שאנשים מצפים שיש להם, אבל הייתי אומר שזה הנורמה, והאי יכולת לעשות התמודדות, זה היוצא דופן. אבל זה דורש גם את ההבנה מצידנו, וגם את הכלים הפסיכולוגיים והתקשורתי להיכנס ולהתייחס לדברים האלה, להיבט האלו של החיים ושל ההתמודדות.
תודה.
סליחה, רציתי לשאול משהו, איך אתה מתייחס לחלק מהתגובות של אנשים שהולכים ומחפשים עוד חוות דעת ועוד חוות דעת ועוד חוות דעת כחלק מתהליך תקווה?
אוקיי. אז אני אומר להם כמה דברים. אחד, שאני רוצה שיהיה להם את הטיפול הכי טוב שאפשרי, וחשוב לי גם כן שיש להם שקט נפשי שזה קיים, שמקבלים. יש אנשים שמחפשים, שממשיכים לקבל, כמו שאנשים שקשה להם לעשות החלטות ונכנסים ל-overthinking, יש אנשים שיחפשו בלי סוף מספר של התייעצויות עד שהם שומעים מישהו שנותן להם את התשובה שהם רוצים לשמוע. ואני אומר את זה באופן גלוי, אני אגיד קודם כל אני אגיד, אם יש מישהו אחר רעיון יותר טוב ממני, בשמחה אני רוצה ללכת על זה, אוקיי? אבל אם תקבל המלצה שנראה לי שמסכן אותך, אינו לטובתך, אני אתן לך הערכה ישירה, אוקיי? ומשהו שבאמת יכול לעזור לך, אני משת"פ מלא. על משהו שיזיק לך, אני לא אשתף פעולה שמשהו שברור שיזיק לך. כי אני אוהב אותך יותר מדי, והביטוי הזה כל הזמן, לאורך היחס, חשוב לי עם כל חולה וחולה, שכל פעם שהם יוצאים מהחדר שלי, שהם תרגיש אכפתיות. אוקיי? שהם יודעים שהבסיס של היחס בינינו, זה לא סתם יחס מקצועי וטכנית, אלא יחס של אכפתיות, שאני מביא עם היחס גם כן מידה טכנית. אבל הדבר היסודי זה היחס, זה האכפתיות אישי לגורלך. כי בן אדם באמת מרגיש וחושב שיש לי אכפתיות עמוק לגורלם, הסיכוי שהם יחשיבו לי בסוף של דבר גבוה יותר.
אני חושבת שאפשר להסתכל על זה, קודם כל תודה רבה על ההרצאה, אני חושבת שאפשר להסתכל על זה בשתי נקודות מבט, וזה לא בהכרח בסתירה. נקודת מבט אחת היא נקודת המבט באמת מבחינת אתיקה שלך כרופא, אז ה-ethics of care, אני חושבת שהדגמת את זה פה בצורה מופתית, יחד עם זאת יכול להיות שיהיו מטופלים, שאפשר יהיה באותו דיאלוג פתוח, להגדיר את הגבולות המקצועיות שלך, של הרופאים אני מתכוונת, שאני כרופא לא יעשה משהו שמזיק לך, זה לא בהכרח בא ממקור של אכפתיות.
אבל שזה בא מאהבה, שזה בא מאהבה ואכפתיות, I care about you too much to
אוקיי. אז אני רוצה רגע לאתגר ולהגיד שיכול להיות שאפשר יהיה באמת לפעול באכפתיות בצורה רציפה וקבועה וכך הלאה, אבל אני לא בטוחה אם זאת שאלה, אני רוצה לשים את זה כשאלה, האם תמיד רופא יכול להרגיש את האכפתיות כלפי כל המטופלים שלו, או שאולי יהיו מקומות שהוא יגדיר את הגבולות ויגיד מכאן אני לא אעשה כי זה מזיק וזה משהו שאני מחויב לו מקצועי.
So the limit, אתה לא יכול לבקש ממשהו להזיק לך, או משהו שיזיק לאחרים.
אוקיי.
אבל זה השוליים של השיחה, כי העיקר השיחה the relationship is part of the therapy, and it is the relationship which creates the environment where adaptive hope can flourish.
כן. הסתכלתי על זה מנקודת מבט של האתיקה המקצועית. תודה רבה.
עוד שאלות? אוקיי, תודה רבה פרופסור צ'רני.
בשמחה. אני מקווה שאני תרמתי לכם היום, ושאנחנו נמשיך לעבוד ביחד ולתמוך ולעודד וללמד אחד את השני. אז תודה רבה לכולם.
תודה לך, ואני רק אגיד שההרצאה תעלה לערוץ שלנו בימים הקרובים.
תודה רבה. אוקיי.